All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jared Nioe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great presentation lined up to discuss how to go about developing an effective social media strategy with some goals that will help you, hopefully drive impact on your level of success using whatever platform works best for you. Before starting, I need to touch on a few housekeeping items. If you've been on our webinars before, I apologize. You've probably heard this 500 times. The webinar is being recorded. You'll get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. You'll also have a link to download a copy of the presentation. And you can always access all of our webinar recordings at alta.org/webinars. In the meantime, you can also download a copy of today's presentations from the handouts section if you're on your computer right now. If you have any questions during the webinar, use the questions box. We'll hold a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. Definitely need to thank Old Republic Title for sponsoring today's Alta Insights presentation. And before introducing today's speakers, here's a short message from Old Republic.
As an agency-driven underwriter, we're dedicated to our agents. During the shifting seas of the title industry, you can count on Old Republic Title to be your anchor. We know the ropes and have weathered the storms. Our success is rooted in our strength and stability, and we want the same for you. When our agents set sail, we provide the compass. We help navigate the choppy waters and batten down the hatches. At Old Republic Title, all hands are on deck to supply our agents with tools to run a tight ship. Making way for your success is our greatest commitment. We are agency driven, today, tomorrow, and throughout your voyage.
Okay, looks like we're back. Thank you, Old Republic Title, for that message, and we'll batten down the hatches and introduce today's speakers. Joining us today, we have Dean Kalura. Dean is co-founder and CEO of TitleTap, and we also have the pleasure to hear from Colin Smith, who is Marketing Technology and Innovation Manager at Old Republic Title. And with that, I'll let either of you talk a little bit more about yourselves before we get into the content. And Dean, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, Jerry. Thanks for having us on, and Colin, super stoked to be doing this with you, man. So ready to dive in. For those that aren't familiar with TitleTap, real quick, we do digital marketing websites, calculators for title agents and attorneys throughout the country. That is our niche, and so we try to help folks look their best version of themselves online. Colin, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Colin Smith, and I'm based out of our marketing operation in San Antonio, and I help with marketing strategy for all of ORT for both our agency and direct operations. So excited to talk with you guys today about some ways that you can help grow your social media presence for your title agencies.
Yeah, so we can kick off the next slide just so everybody gets a sense of how we'll sort of structure a little bit of the agenda today. Colin and I are going to basically be having a conversation, fireside chat throughout this, and we just felt it was a little bit more relevant in that there's so much to probably take in regarding social media strategy that we're not going to be able to get to on this. I think we have about an hour together. So we wanted to really hone in on a couple tips to help those that are listening really kind of prioritize where this fits in your model. And so here's some of the talking points we're going to dive into. Which social platform is right for you, some considerations and skills to think about, how to kind of figure out where your customers are, and then where to look for content that they really care about and not just come off as like white noise. some tools you can use also to help you stay more consistent, and then ultimately, how do you really garner, setting goals for social media? What's really, realistic? And so we'll dive into some of this. Colin's got some excellent practical background experience that he's going to share, and I'll do my best to also share what we've noticed throughout servicing a lot of our customers. But I think we can kind of kick off the first bit here, Colin, with, I don't know if we have some stats. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to dive into these, Colin.
Yeah, absolutely. So often, especially from a leadership standpoint within an organization, there are questions of, is it worth the time and money to either dedicate someone's time who serves in an existing role to focus on social media, or is it worth having somebody come in specifically, whether it's contracting or you hire somebody to handle social media? But realistically, when we look at the stats when it comes to social, for realtors, 77% of realtors, this is all from the National Association of Realtors, 77% of realtors actively use social media for real estate in some way, shape, or form. So if realtors, a strong majority, are using it, it'd be remiss for us not to be involved and engaged. 47% of the real estate business says that social media results in the highest quality leads. So as they're trying to drive new business, social media is giving them the highest quality leads versus other sources. And I completely buy this stat. 99% of millennials and even 90% of boomers are saying that they start their home search online. I bought my home because I found it online first. So the idea of ignoring social, you can see where there's already value built into where our users are right now. So Dean, when people are starting to think about social media and how they want to invest their time, how do they decide what social media platform is going to be best for them?
This is a question we get a ton, and at the latest Alta Springboard that I sat with several folks and the brain dates, and this was really on top of which platform, kind of figuring out priority, right? So one question I always like to ask is, if you only have a half hour, an hour a week to really dedicate to social media, and you've got short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, but your short-term goals are really burning the hole in your pocket, and it's lead generation, right? I'm trying to connect with social media because I think management thinks we're going to get more leads faster, all of which could happen. But if you haven't really dabbled in it before and aren't necessarily built a process around it, it could be challenging. And so what I always like to ask is, so how currently do you get your business if lead generation is the priority, and if it's a toss up between having the lunch with that broker that you're trying to get that extra 1 or 2 deals a month from, and you have a relationship, and that's the way you've gotten the last 4 or 5 deals, or coming up with a strategy for social media and content. If the short term is I need that next lead, go have the lunch, right? Because there's a lot to the strategy. It's not just figuring out what to post. There's things we'll talk about in terms of engagement and monitoring and things you really have to pay attention to. So one of the things that I would stress is that I'm assuming the folks listening have prioritized and said, no, this is a channel we want to double down. We have some midterm and long-term goals. We want to have a presence here that's consistent. And if that's the case, then this is definitely going to, I think, align better than, hey, I need a lead yesterday, right? So I would just again stress that more and more, because there's certainly a lot of shiny objects with social media. So to answer the question, I think a lot of it starts with home base, right? What do you do personally now? Like what does your staff do? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Insta? Do you do TikTok? Like what is sort of the least path of resistance, so that you don't have to necessarily create a bunch of new habits? I think the number one, hurry up and wait with social is the consistency factor, and it's learning all the odds and ends, and it's a learning curve, and it changes all the time. So I would definitely start with looking at a platform that you currently use, and then also diving a little bit deeper into, and you can go to the next slide there, Colin, but diving into looking at your habits as well. Like are you currently used to documenting everything in your life, or in the life of your business? Because again, when you're talking about having to set aside time or remembering to capture a moment, each of the platforms, which Colin will get into, the content's different, depending on what you're using. And so they're all going to require a little bit of different type of skill set. But the consistency factor does fall back on, is it a habit already? Do I already do this, or I'm going to have to remember to do this? And if it's not a habit, it's okay. We'll talk about some tips to help it get there. But, it's something to consider. And then ultimately, like I started out with, how much time do you really have to dedicate to this, and where does it fall in your order of priority? Do you have a team that, as Colin was mentioning earlier, that you could dedicate or delegate to, or someone that has bandwidth to train on this? So when you're looking at social, the easiest tip I can offer here is really start at home base. What do you currently use personally, and extend that as a smaller degree of separation to applying that practice for your business than it would be to start from scratch, right? So, and that could be one or a couple of the ones that you just had up there in terms of options. Without a doubt, I would say, I don't know what you've seen, Colin, I still see Facebook and Instagram being used a ton. I know TikTok has grown in popularity, but a lot of the folks that we work with, a lot of their customers are still leveraging Facebook. I mean, have you seen the same bit on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely, kind of ties into looking at some of these considerations. Every platform is different. Every platform has its value, and honestly, I can't say that one platform is better than another, even in the title or real estate space, because it's all just a matter of what's going to work best for your user base. So, some things to think about. I kind of took the top platforms that realistically, I would expect a company to consider using. And when you think about that user base, Dean, to your point, the age demographic that's buying and selling homes right now, we're not in that Gen Z age group yet as far as home buying and home selling. The largest demographic really still does land with Facebook and Instagram. With those being platforms owned by the same company, that certainly does make it easier to manage those together. And I made a note here that those require the least effort, simply for the fact of the way that they're structured. It's kind of if you can stay consistent in publishing content and getting messaging out, that typically can yield some solid results. Where the other platforms get interesting is just the different dynamics in the way that they interact. Twitter's been getting a lot of news lately. And if you haven't heard about Twitter, then you must be living in a hole in the ground, because Twitter's getting a lot of buzz. I don't expect the massive changes at Twitter that a lot of people fear, but realistically though, when I think about marketing on Twitter, where there are some challenges for businesses, the fact that Twitter is meant to be a conversation. You don't just tweet and leave it out there and ignore it. You have to actively be engaging with your followers, engaging on other posts, engaging on the responses, the retweets, things like that. So Twitter really is meant to be a conversation. It can be very challenging for businesses that don't have dedicated staff for social to manage Twitter. And you also have to consider, are your users there? Is that where you're going to be engaging with your customers? So that's a big thing to consider. LinkedIn really is a powerful platform, and it's something that from a B2B standpoint, there's no rival to it. It is absolutely, from a B2B standpoint, a very powerful platform. And definitely kind of in referral space and things like that, it can be really valuable. But trying to reach consumers or even realtors, things like that, it can be a little bit more challenging, because that's not typically where they're spending their time for their own personal needs, or even from a real estate standpoint, kind of trying to grow their businesses, typically on the other platforms. Now, Snapchat and TikTok, that's what I guarantee you, your nieces and nephews, or the people in your family, younger folks. I've got a couple Gen Zers on staff that they swear by Snapchat and TikTok. And don't get me wrong, they're very, very powerful platforms. And they're only starting to have the user base that is more in that home buying, home selling demographic. And so it's a combination of the Snapchat users are aging up. but also those platforms are adapting and evolving in a way that it's pulling in broader demographics. So the catch with those is that, again, it's like Twitter, it requires daily effort and active participation. You have to be involved consistently and regularly, whereas like with Facebook and Instagram, it's a little bit easier to schedule things in advance and things like that. So Dean, I've talked a lot about kind of the different platforms and kind of talking about demographics and stuff, but when you have somebody that asks you about which platform they should be using or something like that, how do you help them identify where their customers are so that they know which platform is going to be best suited for them from a demographic standpoint?
Yeah, and just before I get there, Colin, I just want to stress, like, this is so, even with Facebook and Instagram, I can't stress enough the consistency of engagement. So, tracking where your users, if they're posting something, commenting, liking, showing that you have interest, that you're actually spending time, following them and giving them kudos or commenting on some opinion. It takes work, right? It takes work and a commitment. And then, we're going to get to also some of the content considerations, because that's huge. They vary depending on the platform as well. But you asked a question, where do I start with finding kind of which ones my customers leverage? And we joked about this earlier, Colin, but the reality is, Google's powerful, right? So, the first step I would take is Google them, see what platforms they're registered for. If you type in a name, usually it'll give you, profile registration hits of what comes up on that person's name. And so you can easily see where they're at. If you're inside of a certain, like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, you can search, you can also search for them within those platforms to see how active they are. And, are they posting regularly? What kind of content, are they sharing? Another way to kind of go about it is look at your last, 8 to 10 transactions, see what kind of story they tell, who's doing business with you, where are they doing the business. My guess is at some point they have content related to the areas that they service, whether it's community events, neighborhood news related to new developments, maybe it's about certain builders that they work with. It could vary. So if they're sharing that type of content, the likelihood of them being attracted to similar content is pretty high. So, I would do a little bit of a research project, see who your top clients are, how are they reaching their customers, really try to mimic some of their behavior, because they're going to be attracted to it because it's something familiar, right? So if you're posting content that they tend to post that's kind of like kind for their audiences, it may be something they can share with their audience, right? And then you've got sort of that attribution back, to you as a source of that. So, really, it's trying to figure out, who is doing business with you, where are they doing the business, and then how are they attracting business that they bring in the door themselves. And I think that will lay a little bit of a good groundwork to get started in terms of some of the trends you're seeing out there. And then I would also ask, like, what aren't they necessarily seeing a lot of that they wish they had more of in terms of content? And that'll give you a leg up in terms of what sources, when you're looking for different types of sources to explore. So, Colin, did you do a degree of that? When you guys were kind of trying to map out who your targets were in terms of getting a connection created, a conversation started, what kind of was it similar homework that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking up your top clients, a lot of people fear that looking people up on social media and stuff is creepy and stuff. It's what it's there for,
Sure.
to be honest. It's
Right.
there to find out about these people and to connect with them. So, I encourage our social media team to be active in looking at activity in the industry and from our top customers. We at Old Republic Title, we actually follow a massive group of our title agents to see what kind of content they're sharing, because we want to know if we're publishing the right content that's going to be relevant and applicable for our title agents. And so it's really important to do that market research. So it may be a matter of whoever's running your social or sales reps for your agency or something like that, making sure that they're connected with their top clients on social media and then being able to get that insight of what sort of content do they share, and Dean, to your point, asking, to say, what sort of stuff are you missing? Some of my biggest successes when it comes to social media have been as a result of feedback that we've gotten from real estate agents saying, hey, we really need something like this. And our first instinct, I'll admit, was to find that and just hand it to them and say, here you go, you can post it. But you spoke to something about publishing content that they will want to pass along, and then it references everything back to you. So you kind of get the credit for it. And so there's a lot of value in looking at what's the content that our realtors or our followers, let's just keep it general, that our followers would want to not only see for themselves, but it's valuable content for them to pass along. And you can't do that if you aren't looking at those users and those customers to find out what sort of content that's valuable for them.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the homework, right? I mean, Google them, look at, if you're needing a short list, and many of you track very diligently who's doing business with you. That's a quick, top 10 list, and you punch in their name on each of the profiles you're thinking that you're going to be able to stay consistent with. See when their latest posts were, see what type of content do they, engage a lot. How do they engage? And then if you start again mimicking some of that, it's going to be an easier shoe in, I think, to get them attracted to follow more of what you're posting, and then that kind of helps you break the bread around, what else can we offer to help you become more engaging as well, that you find relevant value in. So yeah, great. That's we've seen that kind of happen over and over again. So it's certainly a formula that works. So I think moving on, we're kind of focusing on content. I think you kind of hit on this a little bit before, but to build on kind of what customers really care about, I think you had some interesting points here.
Yeah, when it comes to content, it makes me think about what companies like Amazon or Facebook or even Google, to an extent, the way that they serve up the content that you most want to see. Dean, you and I haven't talked about this, but I was thinking about this morning, that when you go to Amazon and it makes recommendations, and they're always so spot on because they're looking at your
everything.
Your history, yeah, everything. That's a good way to put it. That's a whole other discussion.
Right.
But they're looking at your behaviors and things like that. So we've already talked a little bit about researching your top clients and things like that to get an idea of, one, what platforms are they using, where are they, how are they behaving online. But relevancy is really the key. Ultimately, if you want people to engage, because I'm going to click on that ad that has something that is totally perfectly spot on for me, that it's like, how has that been missing in my life for this long and I've never bought it? It's that impulse of, that's so relevant to me that I have to engage with that. I have to buy it. I have to read it. I have to look at it. And so when it comes to the content that we're sharing online, relevancy is always the most important thing. And when we talk about what's relevant, it's local. That's realistically, that is the best recommendation that I can make when it comes to how do we find content that people are going to find relevant, that people are going to be interested in. And it is finding local and Dean, you even emphasize hyper local content. So when I say local content, that's pulling from local news sources, local business journals, local cultural magazines, things like that. Those have been some of my best valuable resources when it comes to sharing content that people in my area are going to want to engage with. When they find out information about that highway expansion project, or the new shopping center that's being built, or if there's a large festival or event coming up, that it's something that people are really going to connect with. Sharing that type of content, even when it's not something that is real estate per se. Certainly reference all of your state and state regulations on what you're able to share. But in terms of content, local always wins, because it's the things that people are connected to. Dean, do you have anything you want to expand on that?
No, that's it, man. I mean, I always try to preach, share what's in your four walls, because that is, typically what will garner, and many of you watching this that have shared something, very, very local, you see a lot more hits and engagement than sometimes some of the national stuff that might get, considered to be just white noise out there, because it's relevant to that person who might be working that market, or, does a lot of business with you, and maybe you've announced something new about the office expansion. I kind of do it akin to like whenever someone gets married or has a new kid, like, those types of posts get way more engagement, because it's, people that care about them, are seeing great milestones in someone's life, and that works, in some instances also with businesses. If you're adding new staff, you're expanding to a new office, you got a new line of service area that you want to talk about. But equally as important is, what are some of the changes in effect happening to a territory that a broker might be working that they may or may not know about yet, right? Or that new development that, offers, these kind of amenities, and, you happen to know and have relationships there, and, you're able to share some value. These are things that are going to really be, I think, insightful, and get a little bit more engagement than something that's just more, national and generic. But yeah, at local, we see it, equally, like all day long. People, love to engage in things that matter to them the most, and so you definitely will win there. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
Yeah, I'll just say the highest performing post that I've ever done was about an IKEA being announced in our market. Had nothing to do with our company or business, but when the announcement was made that IKEA was going to be building a location in my city, sharing that was honestly, to date, the highest performing post that I've ever had on a regional level. So yeah, I mean, it's the information that people want to see, and I think the reason it did so well is because people saw it and thought, oh man, I got to tell everybody. But yeah, also, and something that we didn't specifically call out, but Dean, to your point about it's the weddings and things like that. The things about the people on your team and within the staff. People like seeing the people that they know and the people that they work with. So that's another easy win. If you want to get engagement from your followers, well, that might not be the sort of content that you're going to get shares on and things like that. But if you're just looking for ways for your followers on whichever of the platforms you decide is the right fit for you, an easy way for your followers to feel like they're engaged and connected, and kind of build an emotional investment is to Dean's point, the stuff inside of your four walls, and highlighting the people on your team. So that's another great win. But
one freebie real quick too, Colin, real quick, is speaking of that, those milestone wins, and many of you may do this already, so it might fall on to be kind of a little bit old news, but if you're actively, seeing customers sharing these life events, about their closing, just make sure they tag your business in those posts, right? All too often, and I still see it today, where people will say, oh, it was a great closing for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, smooth. That's great, but only people that know you already get to see that. It's a lot better if Mr. and Mrs. Smith post that on their social feed, but tag your business, because now you get all this exposure to their network. So I still stress that as a very active best practice, and I'm seeing it more and more, which is awesome, because again, those are time moments for those folks, right? So just like we talked about, those tend to get a lot of engagement, a lot of high fives and whatnot, and in many cases they come up again a year later. Having your business tagged in those posts, again, just pays a lot of mileage forward, with that type of content. But anyway, we were on the local, so I wanted to share that bit again.
Yeah, that's great. You're absolutely right. That's a perfect call out. So Dean, I know that one of the biggest challenges that I've dealt with in managing social for a title agency is staying consistent and just making sure that I'm able to regularly reach out to my followers and not fall off the wagon when it comes to social. So what kind of tools do you recommend, or do you know that title agents and their teams can use to stay consistent?
Yeah, so there's several, and I would call out the fact that totally appreciate most of those listening right now. You know, the business is very reactionary. Fires happen all the time. And in a super busy market, it's really hard to say, hey, my week is going to be exactly like I planned it. You know, I'm going to have this amount of time. It's just not real, right? Like it doesn't always work out that way most of the time. And so I would, you know, ask that everyone, you know, just take that into consideration with expectations with this. But there are some little things that you can, I think, apply. And it doesn't have to be too, you know, crazy. And shocker, right? The first one on here is your calendar, and just scheduling time. Speaking for myself, if things are not on my calendar, if I don't block time out, it just does not happen. You know, life just moves at warp speed, and if I don't have a call out for something specific, you know, I'm going to miss it. So treat this no different. It's another task. It's something you have to get on the calendar to have a focus on. So that's the first place I would try to make a habit in, is, you know, challenge yourself to keep it, you know, consistent once a week, just to have dedicated time to think about what matters in terms of your social strategy. The now called Meta Business Suite, so Facebook and Instagram, has, to Colin's point earlier, made it really kind of a more efficient process, because they have a scheduling module built within that that particular social media platform that makes it super easy to schedule your posts out. And so if you take the dedicated time you've got, you know, sort of ironed out into your calendar to schedule those posts out, you know, you could do it in 15, 20, 30 minutes if you have an idea of what you would like to share ahead of time. And so that makes it really, you know, set it and forget it to the extent of posting. Not forget it that it's going to be posted, because like we said, people are going to comment, hopefully, and engage, and you want to be able to actively respond and engage with that individual. Very important, because again, this goes back to your particular protocols around content. There are certain pieces that are going to, you know, call out and engage people a little bit more than others, and some may have a very strong opinion about a particular post. So you just have to be aware of that, because they can quickly, Colin, I've seen things spiral before too, and it was like, oh, that was the wrong post. It seemed, you know, harmless, but somewhere someone had a different opinion, and it really lit fire. So you just have to, you know, really talk about the nature of that content, so that, you know, it's sort of neutralized in terms of, you know, what you'll have to engage on. There's other subscription type platforms too. Some of these are very well known. You know, Hootsuite, Sprout Social are all different types of scheduling related platforms that help you kind of consolidate your touch points into one area, so you're not having to manage in a lot of different parts. When Colin and I were talking about this, he brought up a good point. I mean, really, you know, look at those if you've got a larger team. If you're kind of a one-man band, or you got a very small, you know, one other dedicated person, you should be able to do what you need to do within either your own calendar, or, like in the case of Facebook and Instagram, you know, kind of within that console, to not need to, you know, subscribe to something else. But again, that totally depends on your model and your goals. And but we've just seen them become a lot more effective in some larger teams to really get the max usage and utility out of those types of platforms. Paperly is another platform we always recommend to help you aggregate content. So again, you're able to kind of subscribe to Paperly to kind of punch in the types of categories of content you care about, and it kind of offers up options for you at that point that you can grab. It does have integrations to help you post. You can even have your own news letter or paper with it. We've seen it applied that way, and a lot of these tools can also be extended as options to your brokers. So as you get more familiar with the processes here, you can then become a resource too, to help, you know, share the successes you've had within social, you know, leveraging some of these tools. Those are always good conversations to have. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Colin.
Yeah, a couple little thoughts. I'll just shamelessly say that the ORT social team uses Sprout Social, and it's definitely something that when I was managing social media for a title agent, and I had 5 Facebook pages, you know, LinkedIn, Instagram, it was just me. There was no need for one of those larger platforms, especially the way that Meta has evolved the business suite for Facebook and Instagram. You can do so much managing your platforms just through that. And so for a smaller team, I absolutely recommend that. But as the team starts to grow, if you end up with a marketing team of maybe a few people that all manage the social media platforms for your agency, and you've got a handful of platforms that you think you just want to have a really good way to manage all of those. The platforms like Hootsuite and Sprout Social really are valuable and can be really great. I do have a little bit of a shameless plug for a tool that's great to stay consistent from older public titles. So something that we offer to all of our agents is a platform called EasyShare. And EasyShare is similar to Paperly in the fact that it aggregates, it pulls together social media content that is all relevant for the real estate and title industry, even for investors and things like that. So it's something that if you're interested in, you can reach out to your older public title agency rep, and they'll be able to help you get connected with EasyShare. You can also find it on StarsLink. But it's a great tool because it allows you to, one, we serve up content for you that you can easily schedule or share straight from the platform, but you're also able to publish to multiple social pages all at once. So it can solve a little bit of the stress of having to publish to multiple pages. So just a tool that's, if you're an older public title agent, reach out to your agency rep and they can help get you some more information on EasyShare. Dean, do you have something you want to share as well?
I do, yeah. So I'll match you there. We also have a pretty cool tool that we're excited about for title type customers, and it's called Social Lite. And very similarly, you tell us kind of what sources that you want to follow. Some may be local, some may be national, and what keywords you really want to rank high for. So this particular tool allows you to kind of get served up only the articles that are relevant to the types of things that you are interested in, and then it will also equally do some posting as a blog post summary on your website and also on Facebook. And what's nice about the posts is that they point back to your website, so you don't lose the traffic or opportunities for that. But it's just another streamlined way to do some content marketing, including social media posting and management, kind of done for you style. So happy to talk to folks interested in learning more about that. And then also want to plug Alta Hop has some amazing resources for social media. So as you sort of gear up for which platform you're going to double down on, I encourage you to explore the resources there. And Sean and Jeremy at Alta can kind of dive a little bit deeper into what's possible. But there's a lot of stuff already pre-baked for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Again, the hardest part for most is just really understanding A, their audience, and B, how am I going to create a new habit here? How am I going to stay consistent with this? But the resources are abound once you've kind of made that decision to commit. But yeah, hopefully some cool tools here to get you going. What else we got, Colin?
The fun part.
The drum roll.
This is, yeah, to a marketing person, marketers love goals and they love benchmarks and they love to be able to track things like ROI, but probably not near as much as the people that handle the P&L for an organization. And so they have to balance their payroll, the efforts that they're spending on marketing to justify those. So, we wanted to give you guys a little bit of a perspective on setting social media goals that are realistic. And I'm going to share something that I learned. This was a few years ago. I came across this, and it can sound a little polarizing, but I promise we'll explain it in the end. If you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, he's an entrepreneur and business coach and very opinionated. And he tells a story at a TED Talk a few years ago about he was running a social media campaign for a large company, and he would go and present this to the chief marketing officer, and they would ask him, but what's the ROI on that ad? What's the ROI on this? What's the ROI on this? And really just kept hounding. And Gary Vee talks about that he tried to show metrics that we drove this many clicks to the website, or we had this many leads that came out of it, or whatever. And but right. But what's the ROI? What's the ROI on social media? Tell me the ROI. And that ultimately he just came back and said, well, what's the ROI of your mother? And really caught this CMO off guard, like just really knocked him back. Said, but hear me out. And he starts to explain that, when you think about social media, think about it from the mindset of what's the ROI of your mother? Because I can think about all of the things that my mother, and I can say this for me personally, not just for Gary Vee, but I think about how I became who I am, and so much of that has to do with life experiences that I have, and how my mama raised me. And so, if I were to take one specific instance of, a time I got a really bad haircut, and my mama told me that I was so handsome and that it looked great, and all the other kids they don't know what they're talking about, but that haircut, it looks great, sweetie. And because she said that to me, 25 years later, I was able to close 2 more transactions because she said those words to me. And you're never going to be able to take one individual life experience and say, because of that, I don't want to say never, but typically you can't take one single life experience and say, because of that, these deals close. It's typically more so you have to look at the holistic approach of when it comes to social media and your marketing efforts. What's the ROI of your mother? What's the ROI of social media? Keep those things aligned in the fact that social media is not going to be because you ran this ad, you close this many transactions. It's very difficult to make that tangible. But if you look at it from the entire scope of what does that entail, what would it be if you don't have it? So that actually kind of speaks to what's the cost of not having social media? Because I can think of what would the cost be of not having the influence of my mother? What's the impact of not having social media for your organization? Are your competitors active on social media? And so much of our industry is revolved around, well, competitor down the street has this, so we need to have this. When it comes to social media, weighing the cost, is it something that it's worth doing because the risk of not having it is so great? And Dean has already emphasized some, and I'll let him speak to this a little bit more. But the value of the connection that, if it's a matter of doing social media for an hour or taking a client to lunch, that social media is a long-term play, that's great. But if you need those deals now, lunch is the good call. But the value of that overall connection, the value of that holistic approach to your marketing efforts. I often say that my goal in social media when it comes to supporting a title agency is to embolden and strengthen my sales reps or my escrow officers when they're going out to speak with a client or to have that lunch, that their position is strengthened because of our efforts on social media. Their connections are stronger to their clients, or the customer's connection to the brand, to the organization is stronger because of their social media connections. So, Dean, I'd love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit on this, because I know that it's something that we really got into.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. I mean, it's very gray when you're trying to look at the direct line of sight on deal sourcing that was created just because of, did it start with this post? Did it start with that conversation? I mean, it's hard to tell, but what is consistent is, when you are top of mind frequently, I mean, they're seeing, your brand, your name, your opinions, your posts, your comments, your likes. There's a time investment there that someone is doing. If someone is on social media actively, right, and it's a broker and you're not on it, but a competitor is, someone's doing it. Someone's filling that void and having that type of relationship with them that might be just a little bit more than what you have right now, just because you're not as active. That also helps at the lunch, because if they're posting about something that got a lot of engagement, or it was an interesting piece or a success that they shared, other people know about that because they're following that person's journey. And so that's something very relevant that you can bring up at a lunch, or in many cases they may already know if you're active with them and engaging with them. But again, these are things that kind of stack up, to Colin's point, in a holistic strategy. It's not necessarily you just do this and only this and it's going to be the silver lining to success. It's not how it works. It's very much kind of pick a path that you can stay consistent with and grow into, and and then over time it just becomes part of your ecosystem, with all the other pieces of your business that you've got going on. So it's just, again, one cornerstone. Your website would be another cornerstone. These are both things that you want to mirror the in the field experience, should be mirrored on what you've got going on online. You don't want, what's online, social media or otherwise, to be, dated a year ago or 2 years ago, right? It just doesn't evoke a lot of confidence in folks looking to build trust with you in a relationship, so especially if it's actively how they're promoting and getting their business, right? So I think it does start back in the beginning with, kind of understanding your audience and where they are. But yeah, the value of connection, I mean, that's huge, right? In many cases, that is a huge benefit with social media, is you're able to kind of stay connected, at least on the whereabouts or what's going on with, folks a little bit easier. Not that it replaces the phone call or the lunch, but it's just one other way to stay on top of things. But yeah, it's definitely a part of the strategy, not just the whole strategy.
Excellent. So Dean, I know that you and I talked about that we want to make sure that we're giving kind of next steps and action items for everyone who's attending the call. So with everything that we've discussed, can you kind of summarize where do we go from here?
Yeah, so again, we start at the top, right? Again, when we consider sort of what platforms are right for you, we stress start simple. And really what that means is, what do you do right now, right? What are you doing any of it right now at the home front that you can convert over to business application? Because that's going to be the easiest path to getting started, is not trying to create a whole lot of new. If it's not, what Colin and I have stressed in some of the statistics is a lot of the folks that are in a buying and selling phase of their lives are still on predominantly Facebook and Instagram. So those would be, if you're looking at kind of all the things to start with, and you've never started with social media at all before, we would probably still encourage to start there. It may not be where you end up, but start there, and validate that decision against where you find your audience is actively engaging. Do you have the tools that you need? And do an inventory on that, right? We talked about a couple things in terms of skill sets. And again, it doubles back on doing what you know. Do you actively document things in your life? And again, if it's not you personally, do you have an individual maybe that does, right? I mean, you could have a team member that is more active and can take that on as a lead component for this particular strategy. Going to where your customers are. We talked about, easy ways to hopefully find them, Google them. Look at your transaction history, and see who these people are if you don't already know, and look them up on the different profiles, see how active they are, see what kinds of content they're posting. Colin really stressed also that local content always wins. It does. I mean, that's just the reality. Look what you can post within your four walls, look what you can post about your community, any office news. These are things that are, relatively not difficult to gather. So highly encouraged that you do that, but also don't be afraid to ask. Ask your clients what kind of content they care about, what would be helpful, what would be of value. In terms of mechanisms to stay consistent, we talked about using your calendar being a huge tool for consistency. It's the easiest one out there because you already hopefully use it on a regular basis to time block. So start there. Platforms like Facebook and Instagram, again, they have mechanisms to also help you schedule. We talked about Hootsuite, Sprout Social, and Paperly. I'm sure a copy of this presentation will be shared with everybody so you can kind of resource against the presentation, when you do your post-presentation reviews. But these are all starting points, again, depending on your model, what would make the most sense. But using your calendar never fails. And then start with the end in mind. Again, as Colin kind of incapped it, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. That's so true. But the value of social media really is going to be something that you'll have to compare against, what's the cost benefit, right? Is the risk of not doing this opening an opportunity for a relationship or connection somewhere else with a competitor? Am I setting the right expectations for myself with this? Again, midterm, short-term, long-term type goals. If you're needing business in the door yesterday and you got your last 3 deals by taking brokers out to lunch, go do more lunches, right? I mean, for right now, it doesn't mean that's going to be what it is forever. But if that's the main purpose of you doing social, I think, Colin, you would agree, those kind of opportunities come with time, not necessarily because of one particular post, you're going to have a flood of orders coming in. So it comes with time, building connection, and these are just, door opening opportunities for future conversations and ways to ask the business down the road. Phew, I feel like I need some oxygen. Anything you want to add?
No, I think that's perfect. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Cool. I think, Jeremy, we're about 9 minutes till the top of the hour, so I don't know if now would be a good time to field some questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Colin and Dean. A lot of informational social media tips, gold mine of content for attendees to start driving the conversations on their social channels. Colin, I must be living in a cave. So what's up with Twitter?
Elon Musk is actively trying to buy Twitter outright.
Oh.
So he currently owns a 9% stake, which makes him the largest shareholder, largest majority shareholder, largest shareholder in the organization, and is trying to already filed with the SEC to outright buy Twitter. So.
All right.
For a cool 43, was it 43 billion, Colin? What was it? Some
yeah,
crazy...
somewhere in that range. Yeah.
43 billion for Twitter. Okay.
That's all.
All right.
That's all.
All right. Anyway, so
it's another hobby.
Yeah. We do have a little time for Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to pitch to the speakers, get them in the questions box. Colin had a question for Colin when you mentioned the IKEA post that generated the most traction. Could you talk through the types of hashtags you used, and does using the same hashtags for all your posts, hurt or hinder your content?
That's a good question. I think a lot of that depends on your platform. If you're posting to Twitter consistently, or if you're really active on Instagram, those can be really good opportunities to go beyond your reach of followers. I think that one thing to consider, hashtags can be used in a variety of ways. It can be a matter of, if you're hosting an event and you want all of the attendees at that event to be able to go back and see everyone's posts, and hashtags are a great tool to leverage. If you're hashtagging every post that you put out with the same hashtag and it's a unique hashtag to you, not a ton of value, just for the fact that, is someone going to go search that hashtag? You have to think about the purpose of hashtags is to get you into a list of posts that other posts will be a part of, so that people find yours when they're looking for things of that category. So, if I'm shopping for a motorcycle, don't tell my wife, but if I'm shopping for a motorcycle, I may search for something like a Triumph Bonneville. And so I might look for a hashtag Triumph or hashtag Bonneville. And I'm going to find posts that have that in it that maybe would be outside of my typical following or things like that. So it's a great way to find pages and content that are relevant to me, but are outside of the scope of what I typically would search for. It also can help get into things like the Explore feed or your search tab inside of Instagram, because those algorithms start to pick up on what are the things that you're interested in. And so it looks at those hashtags as things that might pull in relevant content. Now, if you want to have a unique hashtag for yourself, then that's cool. It looks cool. And so, part of doing social sometimes is just looking like you know what you're doing, and throwing a hashtag on it certainly can help to that. But realistically, I think that for most posts and for most purposes, consider the platform that you're on. If you're on Twitter or Instagram, I do recommend adding hashtags, but make sure that they're broad enough that it's something that people would actually look for. So if you're using title insurance or new home buyer or something like hashtag new home buyer, things like that, those are things that are going to be broad and have a lot of scope. So if you're trying to get into some of those conversations or into some of those lanes, using hashtags for those areas that you want to be can be really valuable.
Yeah, so you will not be using hashtag Ducati, correct?
I'm a big fan of the Ducati Scrambler, but probably not.
Okay. All right. Kind of a follow-up question that was intriguing to, the hashtag, if it's specific or broad. And I guess it really comes to knowing your market, knowing maybe what hashtags are trending. So like, say I'm a title agent in South Florida. do I do South Florida real estate agents, or do I do hashtag South Florida and hashtag real estate agents? Are they kind of separate or bundled?
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you're trying to reach. If you're trying to reach South Florida, then hashtag South Florida is the way to go. If you're trying to reach real estate agents broadly, hashtag real estate agents or hashtag real estate is the way to go. If you have those two separate though, then you're going to end up in those two separate pieces. But I always recommend when it comes to hashtags, if you're trying to join a conversation that is being carried through a hashtag, because it's something important to note, you can follow hashtags on Instagram the same way that you can follow a person. So I actually follow some hashtags. And so if you want to show up in that conversation, you need to find the conversation first. So my recommendation is don't guess on your hashtags. Do your research first. Search for what hashtags you think might work. See what see what the conversation is in those hashtags before you start chiming in, because it might not be exactly what you think it is.
Right. And it's a little trial and error, but definitely do your homework on that. Dean, do you have any kind of color as far as what how a title agent should, do you suggest maybe they use their own individual Facebook business page or use their own business pages? Do you use your own or do you use a business page?
Yeah, so all too often we do find where the business owner is very active on the personal side, right? Like they all the relationships are there, and so there is a little concern when thinking now I've got to kind of do this for the business. But I do feel like there's value there, just because that the business needs to kind of stand on its own merit, and certainly those that follow you personally should support you on your business page. So getting them to like the page, should not be that difficult to kind of get the momentum going. The hardest part really is just two things: to know what to split between the two profiles. So not everything that one might post personally is intended to be towards a business audience. And vice versa. So that would probably be one of the hardest challenges I think that we see owners have is, now knowing that they need to kind of split the two pieces of content. Sometimes some don't care, but some do. And I think ultimately, if your plan is to hand off the keys so that someone else on your team can drive this, which helps you build scale, helps you create bandwidth for yourself, the intention should be this is a piece of infrastructure that I'm going to hand off to someone to drive for me so that I can do something that's a higher ROI on my time, right? So this might not be the best use of your particular time. It's hard to do that when it's your personal page. It's never going to happen. You're never going to disconnect to that. But you've got that opportunity if it's a business page. So ultimately that's, I think, should be part of the conversation had is what's the goal, and then who's going to own it, going forward into the near future. And so a business page it gives you more options there.
All right.
I want to chime in just one little bonus thing, really quickly, that actually ties directly to this question, Jeremy, as far as personal or business. One of the things that I know right now a lot of the industry is struggling with is recruiting. And so when we think about where should different people in the organization be active on social, I mentioned LinkedIn as an opportunity for B2B, but it's actually a great spot for recruiting. And so I would encourage, if you have, especially if you have anyone in leadership that is active on social media, to encourage them to be very active as much as they can on LinkedIn, because a lot of candidates, as they're researching a company to determine, is this a company that I want to work for, they're looking up those people that are leaders in that organization. And so by having someone who's active on LinkedIn from a leadership standpoint really helps to build up the credibility and strength of that organization from a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah, no, great tip right there, especially in recruiting. Yeah. We're at the top of the hour, but we've got two more intriguing questions, if you guys don't mind. I'd like to touch on these both. And Maren has a question. We talked about it a little bit, that the personal versus business, but she asked, how do you balance the professional versus personal image on Facebook or Instagram when you start becoming friends with your target audience? you know, she said, she's asking, it's hard to get used to that, doing that when versus a platform like a LinkedIn, which is more business focused. Any insight?
I'll jump on that. Yeah, I typically recommend from a personal, if it's a personal page, and even from a business perspective as well, if you're going to set up a separate business page to represent yourself professionally, is about an 80-20 split. So if you're posting on a personal page, you know, you want to be cognizant of now I have business relationships that are in my personal you know, Facebook content. So it's definitely something you want to be aware of. If you want to be known as the person who parties at the beach or not, then be cognizant of that when you're deciding whether or not am I going to post this. There are tools that you can use to segment your followers. That definitely gets into a little bit more advanced as far as followers, like your friends on Facebook or your followers on Instagram. You can segment who you want to see certain things, but that definitely gets more into the weeds and requires a lot more attention. But I do typically recommend from a how much personal, how much business. I don't want to be that, you know, pyramid scheme person selling makeup or healthcare products or whatever, pushing it on all of my friends. But I do want people to see that I'm active in doing business. So I usually recommend an 80-20 split of 80% personal and 20% business. So 1 out of 5 posts be something at least that reflects that you're still actively working in business. If you do run a business page for yourself as a professional, and even on LinkedIn, this is a good strategy as well. Take that 80-20 split and flip it. So 1 out of your 5 is personal versus the other 4 out of 5 are business focused and tied strictly to kind of your work activities. So bring something that is appropriate, that fits in the business sphere, but is something that people can really align with. That's typically the approach that I would recommend.
Awesome, thank you. And you know, one last question from Amanda, and it's kind of, you know, safeguarding your agency. You know, what kind of protection should a title insurance company take in terms of having their agents, you know, going on social media and making posts? You know, you recommend any special training? You know, Dean, I don't know if you have any insight on that. As well.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So and it's one of the things that we've had to kind of help agents navigate that have come to us kind of with their arms in the air because, you know, the person that created their business page is, you know, no longer with the company and is the admin, and to transfer admin rights. I mean, it can get a bit of a cluster, if you will, to try to reclaim some of that. So if you're the owner, I would definitely, you know, in the platforms that allow you to be the primary admin, then delegate certain access points, you know, go that route. You know, if you're just starting out, definitely structure it that way. So, you know, sort of the last buck ends with you, and you can kind of dictate, you know, how you manage the permissions. In terms of just content as a whole, and I know Colin, you know, in being kind of in organizations that have some size and process, you do want, you know, to understand what's being posted. So, you know, having some guidelines in place, you know, a standard operating procedure for posting content. What are the parameters? What are the, you know, don't touch that type of content versus the stuff that's a bit more evergreen or neutral. You know, as a general guide, you know, sharing like the local vision of your business, whether again you're expanding offices, you're highlighting staff, as Colin mentioned earlier. You know, you're just, you know, maybe you're giving a high five to someone else's success that they reach a certain milestone. You're commenting on just the happenings of your area. You know, these are things that tend to be a little bit more neutral, you know, in terms of how they'll be received, versus getting into some of the other stuff that will be a bit more heated, and you'll get some, you know, debate that's may or may not be what you want in terms of representing for your business. That means something different for everyone. So I'll let everyone kind of define that for themselves, but having something to lean on in terms of a process flow and a procedure is definitely recommended. So, I mean, the answer is yes to that.
All right, fantastic. I do have a few more questions, but we're going to have to wrap up today. Both Dean and Colin's contact information is on the last slide, so if you didn't get your question, please feel free to reach out to them. Yeah, content, local and people. You know, it seems like photos of people always rank high. So you know, if you're out doing something, if you're community service, if your company is giving back locally, any charity event, snap a photo, and highlight that in Facebook, Instagram. We've done a lot of that during COVID. It was hashtag good deeds. We highlighted all the content that was sent to us. We put it on our blog, put it on our social media. It's great stuff. It not only highlights, we protect property rights, but it only emphasizes what you all do in your communities to better, others' lives. And it's powerful. It's a powerful message that you guys do, on a daily, weekly basis. So, content right there is kind of, right there at your fingertips. Dean, you mentioned the homeowner outreach program. Lots of content there. If you go to alta.org/homeowner, there's a social media calendar. It's broken down by month. There's suggested content. There's links to videos and flyers, images that you can use with your posts. So with that, we're about wrapped up. Apologize, we ran over a little bit. I do have a quick poll question to ask everyone. Just would like to know if anyone on today's call, if you have your company listed in the ALTA registry. Right now, there's about 9,000 title agents, settlement companies, real estate attorneys that are in the database. Closing companies that offer remote online notarizations, they're designated with a small little icon that identifies them as being able to offer this service. Just a reminder, the listing of the registry is free, and there's additional incentive now to be in the registry because it's the sole provider of title and settlement agent data that will be plugged into the MISMO e-eligibility exchange. And essentially that is a new platform that's going to help investors and lenders identify how digital a transaction can be. So thank you for participating in that poll here. It looks like 77% of you said yes, 9% said no, and 14% said what's the ALTA registry. So we'll have to connect with you and help educate you on the benefits of being in the registry. Before wrapping up again, I need to thank Old Republic Title. Thank you for sponsoring today's webinar. Dean, Colin, also thank you for sharing your expertise with everyone.
Thanks, man. It was great.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Take care, everyone.
See you guys.